This is Daniel Posney and Shifting Perspectives. And today the topic is about abandonment, self-worth, self-love, neglect, and all the things that are wrapped up into that. And I didn't think that I had practical abandonment in my life, but if I look back at my life and I look how my mind might have perceived it, then there was abandonment there. And so, my father didn't mean to be killed in a car crash when I was 12. But my mind would have taken that and said, you've just been abandoned by your father. Or my mother didn't, mean to show up the way she did. That wasn't open to or knowing how to work with our emotions. And my mind would have seen that as abandonment. So there wasn't any, direct intention of abandoning. And there have been people that, you hear about that have had, real abandonment, that the parent has really abandoned them. And then there's other people in the middle of that too, that the parent needed to do something that kind of put the child's life at harm or by themselves, and that was abandonment. So for me, it doesn't matter so much the details of the abandonment, but what happens is that perception, whether real or perceived, that idea is kind of used as kind of fuel for the fire. And that can start to turn into things. Why was I abandoned? And maybe I'm not worthy of love, and I'm not worthy of this nurturing that I should have gotten. So in short, what tends to happen is some event happens, and then our mind has a perception of that. And the egoic mind, which is just in your childhood, is trying to find itself, and it wants to create some kind of identity story about, okay, this is who I am in the world. And it doesn't really matter if it's someone awesome or someone who's a victim. It has to be some kind of story. So you can imagine that it's looking for any little thing, real or perceived, that can be used as some sort of a trauma that will create more of the story. So if something happens that says this is abandonment, then the mind kind of goes with that down that path, and all the connecting points start to connect in with that makes sense to that. Neglect, self-worth, lack of self-love, and distrust, and all those things all kind of pair to it. So it's just a pattern in the mind is created, and then it combines with the feeling of the body and what the body is feeling at that point, and they connect as like a recipe or a formula. And it says, okay, create more of that. And so what our mind does for us is it starts to create different responses and reactions to create or to attract more of that. So it's an odd thing, but our mind kind of relates that to love sometimes. So we'll say, well, this is what I know love to be, and this is supposed to be good for me. So it'll start to attract more of those things. And then if you pair that in with the law of attraction and vibration and frequency and consciousness, all that together, then the reality of that person will start to reflect that inner consciousness. So this is one that I use a lot, and it's a pretty good analogy about kind of what happens. So if you can imagine a baby in a bassinet, and it's gotten the signal that when I cry, I get fed, and I cry and get fed, cry and get fed. It just becomes a ongoing process. And then one morning, the baby cries, and then the phone rings, and the mom has to go answer that phone. And, oh, I've got a baby over here who really wants to be fed, but it's a really important phone call. So what's happening in the mind of the baby is, okay, what does this mean? This means I'm not worthy. Something that I did caused me to be unworthy of getting the nurturing or getting the nourishment or love. So it kind of tracks that as a new program to run, and all the different biochemical responses start to be fed to the body. And the body starts to kind of combine with that, and it just wants to create more of that feeling. So it's not something that we have intended or was conscious of. It's just you could think of it as more of just a chemical process that's running. And it's these chemical processes that give us the feeling and give us the emotion. So you could want something completely different, and this could not make any sense to you that is something that I want, but there's already a chemical process in the mind. And that's what happens to me, like when I get a little trigger and I get a reaction and some energy comes out in the words that I say, and I don't want that energy to come out, but there it is. I've got energy behind it. Or I'll say something that I don't really want to say, but it comes out. I'm like, holy shit, why did I just say that? But it's, again, if you could think of it more as like a program, and I'll get into a different perspective of this, but right now this is more of a mental view of it, that there's some event happens, some feeling and some response from someone else, and it causes something to fire in the brain, and then from that firing causes a chemical process, or maybe it's the other way around, and it causes more emotional response. So that's the mechanical part of it. And I get a lot of my information from people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, these kind of people. And they're awesome at understanding the chemical, mental mechanics of what's going on here. But there's always something missing. As amazing as those guys are, there's always the compassion, the feeling, the nurturing part of it, that feminine side missing. So what I like to do is I want to combine in the knowledge of it, the understanding of it, with the feeling of it and the compassion of it. So let's see if we can go along here with some of the notes that I've taken about this. So what can happen from this when that sort of program starts to be run is that person starts to close down, and they use different techniques and coping mechanisms to to help them to receive love. And they run a known pattern, and it starts to affect their relationships. And you could see with that, if that person were to keep on running those programs, they would close down more and more, and they would feel more and more strongly that the world is against them, that the world isn't really a nice place. And that kind of feeling starts to tend to bring in certain illnesses that are of the same frequency. So one of the illnesses that are kind of in the same frequency, you can imagine, is arthritis. That's something that kind of causes us to kind of shrink down and start to close down and not be so open and flexible. So that's just one that can kind of be just it's not a punishment. It's not a deserving. It's just that it's in the right frequency range of the feelings that this person has been having. All right, let's see. Yeah, you can imagine what the person is starting to feel. And if you ever felt that feeling, like I know that I have, is I felt like I needed to project myself in a certain way so that I didn't feel that abandonment, so that I didn't feel that neglect. And unfortunately, there is kind of a need to, or it serves your expansion, it serves your evolution to go into that feeling and make sure that that feeling is felt so that it can be cleared. And this is the part that I guess it's up for discussion, but could it be that Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton and people like that and Teal Swan that know the mechanics of it and the processes of it and understand that so completely? Could it be that that's all that we need, is to just to understand it and say, hey, just clear it, like Bob Newhart says in that little skit that he does, he says, just stop. Someone's trying to quit smoking. I can't quit smoking. Just stop. I wonder if that's the truth. Is it we just need to stop, or is the truth that we need to feel some of this, that through our ancestral line, through our grandmothers and great grandmothers and great great grandmothers, that there's an energy that's a part of this always, that's getting some resolution from this? That's the part that I kind of tend to lean into. It may be that the truth is that all I need to do is understand it, but I also want to engage my heart. I want to engage my feelings and my emotions. I live in an emotional world. So my feeling is that I want to do both. I want to understand where it comes from, and I also want to have compassion with myself of where that came about. And if I could have compassion for the abandonment and neglect that I felt in my life, and then understand that that feeling comes from a process, comes from a chemical reaction that was derived from a place of insecurity or vulnerability in my life. And probably there's a high chance that those people didn't mean to project that. It's just something that my mind took on. It's just something that happened. So, and even if it was something that was comes from a place of evil, or it comes from a place of trying to push someone down or hurt someone, those people also came from a place of that. And so I'm really more excited about healing from myself and my ancestral line anyone that had to suffer through any feeling of abandonment or neglect or lack of self-worth and that kind of thing. I want to give you a prescription. So the prescription is to start to change your normal thoughts and behaviors with yourself. So you can use life as the kind of the proving grounds or the testing grounds for this philosophy or this perspective. And in this way, you can introduce new pathways when opportunities come up for you to love yourself. So in the past, it might have been where this feeling came up and a reaction came up that made you feel it the known way of being. There is actually a way for you to kind of put a break into that and then cause a new reaction and new pathways to be created. So that break could be anything from breath work to drumming to didgeridoo to jumping in cold water, some kind of a break in the known routine or known ritual, known patterns, and then introducing something else. So one of the tools that's been really helpful for that is something like tapping or emotional freedom technique. And it's kind of like the way that I've seen tapping is you would tap on certain parts of your body and you would say to yourself, even though I felt abandonment or neglect and felt, that I'm not worthy or worthy of being loved, I completely love and accept myself. So you're breaking into that loop of that program and saying, even though this program is running, I completely love and accept myself. So the mind is sort of, you think that the mind is listening to these things and it's, oh, maybe this is a new program. So that's how I understand tapping. It's kind of a distraction of the mind to introduce a new program. And something else that Teal Swan talks about is this acronym STAY, S-T-A-Y, and it means stop abandoning yourself. So the idea is that when we experience something like abandonment or whatever the negative emotion is, if we perceive it as love, it's something that that we're destined to experience, or something that we deserve, or something like that, we kind of take it into ourselves. And so you can imagine what the mind does, what it sees that, and it says, oh, this is a pattern that I should be involved in. And so the abandonment that we felt from other people is something that we actually cause upon ourselves. Isn't that a trip? That you would abandon yourself. So the question is, if you felt abandonment to someone else, the question to you would be, when do you abandon yourself? Or, here's another one. You don't feel love, or you don't feel quality time from people. Well, do you love yourself and do you give yourself quality time? Goes back to the saying that was given to me by my friend and teacher, Michael Hamilton. Do you love yourself in all ways more than anything or anyone? And what he was saying there was that if I'm not experiencing the level of love that I want to experience, I got to ask myself, do I give that to myself? So what Teal Swan is talking about is that, when we learn this abandonment or this neglect, we probably do we take this into ourselves, that we actually abandon ourselves, meaning we abandon our own self-love, we abandon our own intuition about things, we abandon our own boundaries of ourselves, we abandon what our own needs are. And it's funny, when I'm speaking this out loud, I can realize that I've done all those things. I've abandoned myself, not wanting to, but through distractions and kind of pushing away from myself and tending to other people, it's a funny or interesting thing that some of us people with the biggest hearts and want to give and support, those are all wonderful qualities or wonderful virtues. But it's an opportunity also to check into, why is it, could there be a reason for this, that I'm taking myself away from myself? I'm abandoning myself to kind of give some fuel to my ego. Look at me, I'm a good person. And if you're really honest with yourself, that's kind of what I was doing too, is that I was getting love from that. At the very least, I was getting some affection and appreciation from some people. So I was building up this other part of me called the egoic self. And there was a part of me that I could feel it shrinking in my body, and that hadn't been tended to. So in a way, I was neglecting myself. Or on the outside, you'd see me on the beach, doing martial arts and doing triathlons and having a great time. On the outside, it looked like I was tending to myself, but not really. I was just distracting myself. All right, so let's see. Stop running from our negative emotions. That's what I was talking about going into those emotions, the one that you've kind of been pushing away. And what some people, when they are in the field of abandonment and neglect, they don't want to feel anything bad. And so, they do, like I did, I do whatever I could to create these, happy emotions. And if anything felt unhappy, I didn't want to be there. But part of this process and part of this healing is to go into those emotions and make sure that we can sit with those emotions. And by doing that, we can have empathy and compassion for other people. All right, let's see. Most of us only want to be with ourselves if we feel good. We do anything we can to feel differently, even in engaging in destructive addictions to escape the way that we feel and therefore ourselves. So you abandon yourselves. Can you trust someone who abandons you? So you see what she's saying there is that when you abandon yourself, you don't trust yourself. Because why would you trust someone that abandons themselves? So we need to prove to ourselves that we will not try to escape ourselves when we feel negative emotions. So start to create healthy boundaries and figure out your own needs. And you just you had to get over the idea that I'm self-centered or selfish or not a nice person or not a giving, loving person. You are. That's why you're concerned about it. That's why you feel it in you that you don't want to be a jerk to anyone. You're not going to be. It's just that you can give more and more authentically when you start to being more authentic by knowing your boundaries and what your needs are and moving through any feelings of abandonment, which again, that all ties into codependency and all that kind of stuff. So it's just healing kind of the whole ball of that original piece. Develop trust by knowing yourself better, and you will come to trust that you will always be there for yourself and feel a deep sense of inner peace. And that just comes from, I felt this abandonment. I felt myself relying on people that couldn't really give me what I needed. And it's not that I've tried closing myself down. I've tried putting walls up, and I've tried different techniques to separate myself. But now I know myself, and I just know what my needs are. And I have a really healthy perspective of myself. And from that perspective, I feel very authentic. And by that authenticity, I'm in my own integrity. And from that in integrity, I'm not in the field of abandonment and neglect and lack of self-worth anymore. And it's interesting to me and actually empowering to me to know that, by working on and cultivating my own authentic nature and my own needs, what falls away is the feeling of abandonment. What falls away is the lack of self-worth. It may be that I didn't directly work on those things, but I'm not in the room of those feelings anymore, that I've moved myself into a different room, a room that is more sovereignty, body autonomy, more clear about who I am and what my feelings are, and knowing how my mind is really not my best friend. And I don't pay so much respect, and not respect, attention to what it thinks. So all in all, the whole thing is that I've gotten more clear about who I am and what I am, and that develops more trust in myself and in the world. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for joining. I love you. Thank you. Bless you. And we'll see you, hear you next time. Have a wonderful day.